You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
Hi, good evening. It is 7:01 on Thursday, January 13th. We have a meeting of the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency this evening. My name is Peter Basserman, and I am chair of that commission. Let's see, we have a number of folk that may not have participated in the Zoom meetings associated with Inland Wetlands previously. Normally we have an agenda. It is on the town website. We go down through the agenda, having discussion about the various items. The commissioners will comment, and at the end of the commissioners' comments, it may be appropriate for members of the public to raise questions on the item under discussion. When you're not speaking, please mute your mic so that we have good quality conversation, and you can use the raise your hand feature in the Zoom meeting to indicate that you're looking to speak. Abby and Jamie, please keep me honest in terms of recognizing folk if they wish to speak. As I say, I guess it's being recorded this evening by BCTV. We certainly appreciate their efforts in that regard. Let's see. Any changes to the agenda this evening, Jamie?
No proposed changes.
Okay, first thing is call to order. We have a roll call. Please, commissioners, announce yourselves. Peter Basserman, present.
Larry Spiegelman, present.
Richard Granwald, present.
Mark Steinberg, present.
Commissioner Boda, present.
Melissa Finaro, present.
And staff.
Amy Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent.
Abby York, Inland Wetland Associate, present.
Great, thank you. All right, up first is minutes for approval. We have 2 minutes of regular meeting minutes of December 9th and the site walk of the, the special meeting of the 20th of December. Let's see. I had, I guess, 2 comments on the regular meeting minutes. Abby, under 3 other business on the page 1, it says which the commission, and then I'm not sure whether there was something missing or whether which is the wrong word.
Okay, 1 second. Let me just pull those up. You said bullet 3.
3A.
3A.
The last part of the sentence, last part of the second sentence.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I'll need to read that closer to know what the intent for that was, but yeah, I can fix that. Thank you.
Okay, and the other thing was, I guess on page 3 of 7, the last bullet on 5A, where it says commissioners would be okay with the activity being a subdivision without regulated activity if lots 7 and 8 came back for a permit. And then this may be just understanding, when Commissioner Grenache made a motion without regulated activity with conditions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, and 9, there was nothing in it about 7 and 8 coming back for a permit.
I believe that was one of the conditions. I would have to go back and look at the staff report. I want to say, Jamie, I'm not sure if you remember, I think maybe condition 2.
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. It was one of the conditions that was referenced as being included in the permit. That lots 7 and 8 would come back for an individual application.
Oh, so one of those conditions was 7 and 8 coming back?
Correct.
Thank you.
And in regards to your previous question regarding the minutes, I believe that where it says which should say with the commission.
With the committee. Okay. I guess with that amendment, is there a motion to accept the minutes of December 9th? I'll certainly make that motion.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any abstains? Any
Commissioner Boda, I abstain.
negatives? Okay. Next up is the special meeting minutes of December 20th.
I might note that it says special meeting agenda on top of my page. It probably should have meant special meeting minutes.
Yeah, I caught that. Thank you. I caught that after we had
Okay.
published them, so we figured we would mention it. Thank you.
Well, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of the special meeting on December 20th with that modification.
I'll second that. Mark Steinberg.
Great. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Commissioner Boda, I abstain.
And Commissioner Begamon abstain.
All right, first up this evening, application for receipt inland wetland 21-1203, 26 Old New England Road, construction of a new single-family home. Material was mailed out to the commission on that application. Let's see. Do we need to frame this at all, Jamie, or can we turn it right over to the applicant?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I'll just remind the commission and inform some of the newer commissioners that there was an application received by the commission this past summer for this property. There were some concerns regarding wetland impacts. So after discussion with the commission, the applicant decided to withdraw their application and resubmit. The commission did have a discussion at that time regarding the fact that the application fee for that previous application could count as a credit towards part of the application fee for a subsequent application. So the fee that has been submitted is based off of that, and a fee request out per what was outlined at the August meeting has also been submitted, basically requesting that the application fee be reduced down to the $60 deep fee. So that would be something the commission would have to make a motion on as part of the process.
Okay, thank you. And for the applicant, we have with us tonight?
My name is David Nafis. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, my name is David Nafis. If you can, I can pull up a screen share so you can see the plan that we're talking about.
that would be
Yes, you
helpful.
should be able to screen share. Did you want me to share it or are you going to share it, Dave?
I'm trying to see. I gotta give it a second. My computer's rolling just a second here.
Absolutely.
I don't know why it's not moving.
While he's getting the plan loaded up,
Can you see that?
looks like it's loading. Dave Nafis has started screen sharing is all I see. There we go.
Great,
Can you see it?
yes.
Okay, maybe I can run through some of the changes we've made since last time. I'm here, my name is Dave Nafis. I'm a licensed professional engineer and land surveyor with Nafis and Young. I'm here representing McLean's who own this property here. This property was subdivided about 30 years ago and it was approved. So now the McLean's are coming in to look to build a house they'd want to on the property. If you remember when they came in several months ago, there was some disturbance back. The wetlands line is right here with the triangles, and there's another section that is over in this area over here, a little finger that sticks out. And the McLean's had before were the house was going to be back here in the wetlands, and their septic system was up here where the stockpile area is. Since then, we've gone back and got East Shore out there, and we've done some testing over here along the property line here, and we're able to come up with some test pits to relocate the septic system. What that allowed us to do was to take the house and we were able to push it forward 25 feet. It's still going to require us to go and get a variance at a later date, but right now it makes us push the house forward, and then we could take all the grading and everything else that's related to this development of this house outside the wetlands. It's still within all the upland review areas, but now all grading and everything has been removed outside of the wetland area itself. We have over in this corner over here, we have some underground infiltration for the roof leaders, and right at the end of the driveway, we're putting in in this area here, we're putting in a level spreader to take everything coming down the driveway. The level spreader was designed, the erosion control manual requires that you design it for a 10-year storm, but in this situation, we designed it for the 100. It said we needed 10 feet, but we put in 30 because we figured anything coming in the driveway, we might as well just detain a little bit there and then let it spread out much more, and so it'd be less impact on the wetlands. So those are like the big changes there. We are from the house to the septic, it's going to go into a tank here and then a pump chamber, and then via a flexible force main, which is easily just put in with a ditch witch. So there'll be this disturbance will just be dig a trench, put the pipe in, bury it. It only needs to be about 4 inches wide to hole. It's nothing major. And then over here, we got the septic. It doesn't show much grading because it's only about a foot of grading, and the way this one just happened to work, none of the contours actually, it didn't show up on the contours, but there'll be about a foot. So you'll have a little bit of grading. There'll probably be a little bit more disturbance where when the machine's out there putting the system in, and we'll have to regrade, but the filling in here is less than a foot over the downhill side of the system. So it's very minimal. We have some grading on the sides of the property and stockpiling in the front. At this point, I don't know if David Lord is on the call or not, or if he's in the meeting, because he was gonna go over the plantings that he was proposing along. His plantings mostly along the buffer area in the wetlands where we were making between our disturbed area and the wetland line is where he was looking to go with. But I don't know if he's here yet, because I think he may have had another meeting, so he may not
David, I'm here.
Jumped on the call yet.
David?
Yes.
I'm here.
Oh, you are here. Okay. You want to jump in and take over your plantings?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm not sure if the commission has a copy of what I'm going to be talking about. I seem to have lost my picture. Okay. Back. I have submitted this afternoon a wetland and upland review zone planting plan for this property. Do commission members have copies of this, Jamie?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. It has not been directly sent out to the commissioners. However, it is available in the Dropbox, and I can screen share it if you would like.
Okay, yeah, that would be helpful, I think.
Oh, wrong one.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay, moving on to the first page of type, there's a purpose statement, a timing. We're going to implement the plantings that are proposed later on, and I'll be going into those in detail. Will be adjusted, obviously for the growing season, but also in this particular circumstance, we're going to begin the implementation of the planting plan when rough grading of the site has been completed. This is a somewhat unique development proposal in that the amount of disturbance is relatively limited. We do not have a large amount of disturbance area around the proposed structure, which again limits the necessity for revegetation efforts around the proposed house location. At the bottom of page 1, there's a standard construction sequence, which includes important elements such as the pre-construction meeting, where I will attend along with the town staff and any other parties that are going to be involved with the project. We will mark out in the field the areas that will be receiving revegetation efforts. Again, this project does not propose large areas of grass around the structure. It's mostly going to be in native vegetation, trees and shrubs, with some ground cover grass immediately adjacent to the structure. The plantings and the location of the plantings, again, will be marked in the field by myself, along with Jamie, to identify those areas that we feel need to be revegetated. On page 2, there is a planting area map. The green crosshatched area encompasses a section of the wetland along the west side. The wetland boundary sort of goes down the middle of that crosshatched area. And the adjacent upland review zone, which is to the right and also to the west of the planting area, are the areas that we're going to be looking at. Upland review zone areas are going to be looked at for tree revegetation of trees and shrubs in those areas, the upland review area. The wetland area, or the eastern side of the planting area, is not proposed to be impacted in any way by the proposal. Those areas are going to be reviewed and marked for selective underplantings of possibly trees, but most likely additional shrubs. When I was out on this site, I saw an opportunity for the increase in density and diversity of underplantings would benefit providing a transition zone from the house location to the major portion of wetlands, which are further to the east and in no way are proposed to be disturbed by the development of the house area. The one difference in this particular plan, I have not specified. You can move to page 3, Jamie. There are no numbers for the planting areas. I've proposed to use 3 tree species and 5 shrub species. What I am proposing at this point in time is that Jamie and I walk the site and agree on what areas need replanting around the house and what the numbers will be based on the standard 10-foot spacing of shrubs and 15-foot spacing for trees around the upland review zone that's disturbed, again, for the construction of the single-family residence. That number would then be incorporated into a plan and submitted to the Inland Wetland Office for agreements, concurrence, however you want to deal with that. That's the main change in what the commission has seen in the past with some of my planting plans, where I specifically said which or what the numbers were for each of the individual plant species. Because of the non-standard grading that's going to take place there on this property, I thought it more prudent for us to look at what areas are disturbed and then agree that this area should have a particular number of trees and shrubs put into it at the appropriate time when the planting could commence. And that in that way will determine the right number of trees and shrubs to put into the disturbed areas, and also the areas of wetland that are going to receive the underplantings, which areas are a little thinner as far as a shrub understory and can benefit greatly from the proposed tree and shrub plantings that we're calling for in this particular plan. Moving down the bottom of page 3, there's my standard spacing, permanent vegetative stabilization measures right out of the erosion sediment control handbook, permanent long-term seeding. There's temporary vegetative stabilization, again, from the erosion and sediment control plan. In the event that any unforeseen occurrence halts construction work for any period of time, those temporary seeding measures would be done to cover up disturbed soils at that time. Excuse me, the New England Conservation Wildlife Mix, which is shown there, is a no maintenance, permanent ground cover vegetation. It's a seed mix. It develops grasses, forbs, legumes, and the like. I've attached a copy of a sample of what that mixture contains in a particular year. It changes from year to year based on the source, New England wetland plants. But this would be primarily used for the septic system leach field area and the disturbance for the leach area, any movement back towards the house, excuse me, and any additional areas that we feel necessary to stabilize on a permanent basis and not have a more traditional ground cover grass, lawn, or turf established in those areas. And then under the maintenance and monitoring section, up I see a couple of changes that are going to be needed. The post-completion inspections are going to be done for a period of 5 years, and the 85% threshold for the minimum survival of the trees and shrubs that are planted, that to be in concurrence with your wetland regulations. Comments about any invasives which become established. There are none on the subject property in any of the areas we are proposing to work as of the last time I was on the property. And the last page is a sample of the New England Conservation Wildlife Mix that has the different species which transition from upland species through facultative upland, through facultative wetland species that are ideally suited for long-term, no maintenance, does not have to be mowed, does not have to be cut or controlled in any way or fertilized, as it does produce some of the legumes that are in this plant mix will provide their own fertilizer for the long-term growth of the seed mixtures. That covers the planting plan, which at this point is in a somewhat finalized manner. A couple of changes, especially for the post-completion monitoring and the minimum threshold, but be happy to answer any questions that the commissions have at this time, or provide further discussion if the commission would like to at this point or later in the evening. I don't know if it's appropriate, but one comment that Jamie had listed in her latest review comments, there is no pipe that I was able to see anyway that connect the two wetland areas. The wetland that is in the northwest finger of the property is a depressional pocket type wetland. It extends off-site, but it is surrounded entirely by higher ground, both on-site and off-site to the northwest. There is no channel, there is no defined flow pattern for any excess water to come out of this wetland and flow to the main wetland along the eastern side of the site. Soils there are moderately well drained. They do not have any high groundwater table component in the area between the two defined wetland areas. That's, I believe, is all I have to talk about at this point in time. Again, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Thank you, Mr. Lord. That was a very extensive explanation of the plan. Can you pull up the site plan is up? Can you just, for clarity purposes, tell me where that wildlife mix is going to go on the site plan?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I believe the primary intent would be this leaching field area and any associated disturbance with the force main installation beyond the area around the house where they'd be putting the lawn mix.
So if I were to look at the plan, the area where that finger wetland is within to the right of that, is that to be left as is because it's not disturbed? You know, if we looked at wetland, what is it, 26, 27, 28, to the right of that?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. That's my understanding, but I will ask the applicant team to confirm that.
Yes, this is Dave Nafis. There's no disturbance anywhere. The only disturbance we're having coming from the septic tank and across will be where the force main is. Everything, the force main and the leach fields will be the only areas disturbed. Everything else in that area is gonna be left as is. So we're gonna come across, like I said, with a 6-inch trench for the force main, whatever heat they need to get a vehicle across their rubber tire machine to put the septic in, and that's gonna be it. Everything else will be left as is. Basically you can see where the silt fence is, just outside where the word pump chamber is. That's as far as like the lawn is gonna be extended. Everything else will be left as natural as possible.
So you mentioned, Commissioner Basserman, and you mentioned lawn. Where is the lawn end and the wildlife mix begin?
If you see the around the house, there's the SF with the dashed line there.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's going to be basically the lawn area.
Okay.
Around the house, and everything else, whatever's disturbed outside, it'll just be, like I said, a little trench for the force main and the septic area, and that'll be the only disturbance on the rest of the property are those areas. Everything else will be trying to remain as natural as possible.
And one other question, the grading up, I guess, near the house, what kind of activity is associated with the regrading?
There'll be some just grading around the house. Mainly the back of the house is going to be pretty close to grade there. I mean, there'll have to be some grading with the disturbance and installation of the foundation. There's a couple slopes along the sides, but the back is going to be pretty close to like a slab on grade, almost like walkout. So they're going to try to keep that as close to grade as possible. And then the house will come up and the grading will come up mostly around the sides of the house.
Thank you.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I had suggested that the applicant add a limited disturbance and the existing and proposed tree line to the site plan. That has not happened yet. Is that something the commission is interested in having added to the plan? Or does the commission think it's not necessary?
And the rationale for that, Jamie, it's Commissioner Basserman.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. It's a pretty standard thing that the commission usually requires. Sometimes the silt fence can kind of clearly reflect that, but also identifying that the silt fence is limited disturbance. It could be as simple as just identifying that. But also as far as the tree line, just clearly having the limits of where clearing will be, particularly given the fact that there is the disturbance for the force main. It should be pretty minimal, but just having something in the documentation to support that. The other thing I had suggested they submit is a construction sequence, basically outlining the fact of how the force main would be installed, which was verbally gone over at this evening's meeting. I don't know if the commission's satisfied with the verbal explanation.
No, this is Commissioner Boda. I was wondering about some similar items. I think it seemed like the sequence was really within the planting plan, and typically that is part of the site map itself. And so don't know if it's the intention to just have it be part of the planting plan And I was also interested in, Mr. Nafis, if you review a little bit of the sediment and erosion controls during construction. I see the wetland flags and it looks like silt fence, but I'm wondering if that is the extent of it. And I would agree that we need, there really ought to be a limit of disturbance denoted on the plan, as well as typically in the past with something this close to the wetlands. We ask that permanent markers be left up so that we understand that this homeowner is very interested in living in this space. And at some point we know that properties change hands. And so we want to make sure that there's some permanent marking on the property that that's really an area that shouldn't be mowed or have trees taken down, or any of the number of things that happen on sites like these when there's no demarcations.
Yes, Dave Napes again. Yes, we can certainly leave the wetland flag demarcations up so that they're well aware. We can put some permanent like stakes or something there that's very obvious so they don't go near the wetland areas, because yes, it will be very close.
Yeah, I mean, I think, excuse me for interrupting, Commissioner Boda again. I think the flags are not, those, they're kind of trash over time. Typically what we've seen is something like cedar posts or something like that. I think the wetland office might even have some of those older, we had plaques before, just kind of something that's a little bit more permanent than a plastic flag in a tree. So something to think about. And then if you would just review the during construction sediment and erosion control plans.
Yeah, during the construction, obviously the silt fence will be the first thing that's put up. We have a stockpile area in the front of the building and an anti-tracking pad up at the road. And what's going to happen here, this is going to be, because it's such a tight site, it's going to have to be monitored all the time. And it may require us to go out, we'll have to go out there as it's outlined. We have an erosion control plan, but we'll have to be out there after every storm event checking these to make sure that none of them's knocked over. And if there is an issue, we'll have to take the silt fence and maybe back it up with hay bales, maybe install hay bales along the driveway to make sure water doesn't erode down there. A lot of this is going to be like a dynamic thing for the site because it's such a tight site, and there's, when you got a lot of moving parts like this, what happens is the guys that are putting the foundation in don't worry about silt fences and hay bales, and they're going about what they're doing. So a lot of it's going to have to be monitored closely, and just to make sure that these are all maintained. And if additional are needed because of the way the construction method is going, then we'll have to bolster those as needed. It's kind of hard to, go ahead.
This is Commissioner Boda again. So knowing that the site itself and the driveway has a relatively steeper slope, and so we're looking at some velocity issues, wouldn't it make sense to have to double up the erosion control efforts now instead of waiting for the silt fence to blow out? So, not just doing the silt fence, but putting in a secondary as well.
Well, we can do that. We could put a silt fence back with hay bales. That seems to work because that helps, in case there is some sort of event that happens that we can't control. The hay bales will support the silt fence more than just to keep them from blowing out. So I can certainly add those to the plans. That's not a problem whatsoever. I can add some temporary measures down the driveway too that'll have to be kind of moved and reinstalled on a daily basis. We can do that. That's not a problem either. That's certainly well within the realm of the scope of this project.
Any other questions from the commission?
Yeah, so just I'm also wondering about if the intention, so we, as Jamie brought up earlier, like the construction sequence that Mr. Lord went over, I think it was on the planting plan. and typically that's part of the site map itself. Can you just talk about that a little bit? If that is that your plan for the final? Is that would be, it would be different than how applications normally look for us.
Oh, as far as the, for this site, you mean, for this construction sequence?
Yeah, it's just usually it's part of the map itself.
Okay.
And so there's usually a second sheet that has, you know, there's a few sheets. Usually there's the before, there's the, you know, the existing, there's the construction plan, including the sediment and erosion controls. There's a sheet for sequence and whatnot. And I understand that Mr. Lord discussed it, and I think that it's in the planting plan. I'm just, it would be out of the norm for how our applications generally look. So I don't know if that's problematic for, you know,
Jamie.
the commission. Jamie, if you want to, I don't know. what do you
Frederick,
think?
yeah, Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent to kind of elaborate on that. Usually there is also a construction sequence that is part of the site plan, and it goes over when the silt fence is installed, when the site is cleared, when grading starts, when installation of certain utilities would be, in any associated temporary erosion controls that might be implemented, or how that installation is going to go about so that it's clear erosion controls may or may not be needed. And then also, yes, a lot of times we do require an existing conditions. If that's something the commission wants to see separately, we should inform the applicant of such. And then the other thing I wanted to mention while I've got the floor is there are a lot of boulders on site that I think will have to get moved as part of the house construction. I don't know if the applicant has any intent with those boulders, but would the commission be satisfied with those boulders being utilized as part of the demarcation of
The wetland.
the boundary of disturbance adjacent to the wetland area?
If the material is on site and it's just moving them to the appropriate locations, I think that's a fine application of those boulders.
I agree. This is Commissioner Boda. I agree. I mean, I wouldn't want to see them you know, on the wetland side into the wetland. They would need to be on the boundary.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. One other question for the commission. So the application as submitted has 0 direct wetland impact. However, we did receive the planting plan today, which does mention filling in some of the wetland area adjacent to the disturbance as may be appropriate for the understory. I think the commission has kind of had a past practice when there's a mitigation type effort like this of not requiring an additional fee for that type of disturbance. I just want to make sure that that would be a fair assessment.
Commissioner Bassman, yeah, I find that fair. I think there's a decent amount of plantings, shrubs, et cetera, that's going to be on this site. And I think to the extent that the existing existing plan demonstrates that, I think we're good.
Commissioner Boda, I agree.
Commissioner Bergman, just a question. When I don't know, maybe those with more experience can speak to it, but I don't think I've seen a plan where people are actually planning to plant in the wetland area. Can someone speak to that?
David Lord, the plants that are proposed in the wetland area are to strengthen, increase the diversity and density of vegetation along the wetland edge. It's a strictly beneficial to the wetland and the wildlife habitat functioning of the wetland area. We don't do a lot. You basically just dig a hole and put the plant in. It's all done by hand. There's very little to no disturbance of the wetland other than right where you're putting the plant. It's done on a fairly regular basis where you're trying to strengthen and increase the diversity and density of wetland vegetation associated with the proposed project. It's not an uncommon practice at all to go in and do additional plantings within the wetland area, even though there's no disturbance directly proposed within the wetland area itself as part of the development. We're creating a greater buffer screening of vegetation between the proposed house and the main low-lying area portions of the wetland with the proposed underplantings.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, we do see that particularly if there's a direct wetland impact, but also sometimes when there isn't. And it really depends kind of on the existing wetland condition. There was a site walk conducted for the previous application that was submitted for this site. And there are some areas where there isn't really any understory. So I do think that the wetland would benefit from such plantings. The one question I have relative to that is, as David Lord mentioned, his planting plan does not have numbers of plantings. Is the commission going to want to see numbers of plantings and or at least minimum number of plantings prior to making a determination on this application? Should David Lord and I try and go out to the site to discuss prior to the next meeting? Or is the commission comfortable with the open-ended number?
This is Commissioner Boda. I think that you and David going out and kind of determining what's going to be appropriate, because it's difficult to that 80% survivability. I think it would be good to know what we're starting with, and so we want to make sure that the density is appropriate. So I think coming in with something more concrete would be a good plan.
David Lord for the applicant. In other projects like this that I have worked on, we could ask for a request, it as a condition of approval that the final planting numbers be submitted to the wetland office. Final planting numbers be given to the commission as part of the approval or a condition of approval that we would obviously need to meet. That's a possibility. We could also point in time with the actual amount of disturbance around this particular residence. It's going to be difficult to determine numbers of plantings that are going to be required. We could conceivably, Jamie and I could go out and discuss plantings within the wetland area for the wetland enhancement portion of the plantings, give the commission a number at that point for wetland enhancement plantings, and add some number beyond that for potential upland review area plantings. But that number could change based on what is there for us to work with after rough grading of the site is completed. It is somewhat difficult to come up with numbers for this at this point. We can give you a number based on what we see in as necessary within the wetland portion of the plantings, and say from that interpolate a little bit of base numbers, minimum numbers of trees and shrubs for the upland review area, if that is something that might give the commission a greater sense of understanding and comfort in what's proposed. And then we can follow it up with actual planting numbers that are going to be put into the site once we've determined that number.
This is Commissioner Bassett. It seems to me that we could take a rough cut between now and the next meeting, because we certainly can't act on this evening, but between now and the next meeting, And then as conditions of the site develop, if there's an amendment to that, entertain that change based on conditions that you find when you actually do the site. But I think to Commissioner Boda's point, there's a fair amount of shrubs. There's different species and varieties. The plantings are in different locations. So I think it would be good to, for consistency's sake, as we have with other applications, have a set of numbers associated with those plants that then could change based on actual conditions.
David Lord again. We could certainly come up with that number. That's no problem.
Anything else?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I think the only other comment I had that we didn't touch on is the concern as to whether or not there are any trees in the wetland area that may need to be removed as part of the construction of the house, given how close it is. So particularly if you are going back out to the site before the next meeting, it might be good to assess that. So that way there's no confusion or holdups once the contractor gets out to the site to start the clearing phase.
This Commissioner Bassman, are those trees indicated on the plan?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, individual trees are not indicated on the plan. But I believe the house is about 10 or 15 feet away from the wetland, so it is feasible that there could be a tree or two that would need to be removed. And I think it would just be good to assess that ahead of time, and that could be addressed with the planting plan if a tree needs to get removed, or just trying to look at the whole scope of the project up front.
What is, Commissioner Bassman, this is more education than anything else. What was our normal practice regarding illustrating trees on plans, whether they're coming down or not?
This is Commissioner Boda. I think that's why we have the existing conditions. I mean, so typically we would have an existing condition map, and then we would have this construction. Okay. And so that we can see really like what is the before and after, and any large caliber trees would be noted, particularly if they needed to be removed for construction purposes, or if they were likely to be damaged because of construction.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. Usually the commission requires an existing tree line and a proposed tree line. The commission doesn't always require individual trees to be identified. However, if there's a particular activity getting really close to the vegetation line, particularly if that's where that wetland happens to be, then the commission requests additional information regarding specific trees. So it definitely wouldn't be out of past practice for the commission to request that information.
So in some of this, Commissioner Bassman, somebody looks like we need to probably expand the number of sheets detailing the information associated with the construction activity, the plantings, as opposed to containing it or trying to contain it all on one sheet.
And the reason for asking for that information up front is because otherwise it gets to the point where I'm meeting them out in the field and they say, well, we have to remove that tree in the wetland. And I say, I can't approve any activity in a wetland. You have to go back to the commission. So it really just helps to prevent any delays once they get to the construction phase.
Is the information that we need to go forward clear, David and David? Any questions?
David Lord, yes, I'm comfortable with what direction we need to provide additional information from my perspective.
And David Nappis?
I am also, yes, I'm fine.
Thank you. Appreciate the work, guys. Thank you. Jamie, was there a fee issue associated with this or not?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So at the August meeting, the applicant had a previous application submitted to the application and had a discussion about possibly withdrawing it based on the realization that they were actually going to have a significant amount of activity within the wetland boundaries. So the commission, let me pull up those minutes. The commission agreed that if they withdrew their application, that a credit could be applied to a future application if a future application was submitted in the relatively near future, which I would say this is. But that the deep fee would have to be paid again because that's a mandatory fee that the commission cannot waive. So the previous application and this application are essentially the same amount. So I told them to submit the $60 deep fee, and I sent them an email basically asking them to clarify that they're requesting a reduction of the fee based on the conversation they had with the commission at the August meeting, which they did. So yes, there would have to be a vote. The commission can either do it this evening or at the next meeting. Doing it this evening would help make sure that there's no issues with outstanding application materials at the next meeting though.
This Commissioner Bassman, is it not our practice, generally our practice to do that when we approve the application?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland agent, I think it kind of depends on a case-by-case basis and whether the commission has all the information they need to consider the request. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with you doing it tonight or next meeting.
And the reason I would want to do it tonight is?
If you do not agree to the fee reduction for any reason, then they would have the opportunity to submit the application fee.
I guess I'm okay with dealing with it tonight. Does any commissioner feel differently?
Commissioner Reynolds, I'm fine with that.
Commissioner Steinberg, I'm fine with that.
Commissioner Papantonis, I'm fine with that.
Did somebody, okay.
Did I hear from everyone?
I'm fine with that,
Yeah,
Finaro.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Boda. Jamie, did you want us to make a motion or
Yes,
is it a
please.
general consensus?
Motion, please.
All right. I'll make a motion that Inland Wetland 21.12.03 26 Old New England Road, that we use the previously submitted fee and waive the new fees except for the $60 deep fee.
I'll second that, Peter Bassman. Any further discussion? I guess we need a roll call vote then.
Yes, please.
Finaro, I'm okay with that.
Commissioner Steinberg, I'm okay.
Commissioner Reynolds, okay.
Commissioner
Sure,
Bassman,
Begemon.
okay.
Commissioner Begemon, okay.
Commissioner Papantonis, okay.
Commissioner Boda, aye.
Aye, great. Thank you. We have next up, application for review Inland Wetland 211102, 140, 240 Austin Ryer Lane, repair and replacement of a drainage outlet. Jamie?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland agent. So Abby was out doing an inspection and happened to drive by this property as she was turning around and notified me that some activity was occurring. And in our GIS system, it's clear that there's wetlands to the rear and northwest side of the property. So I drove by and left my card with a contractor on site. The property owner contacted me. I met with the property owner and the site work contractor on site to review the extent of activity and told them that they should submit an inland wetland application. What they were doing was replacing a drainage system and looking to kind of regrade the yard, filling in low spots, maintaining existing drainage directions, patterns. So a sketch of the activity and extent of location has been submitted. I do have a couple of pictures, although I realized they were not quite as comprehensive as I was hoping. And I do also have a GIS map that I can share with the commission. And I believe I saw that the property owner and the contractor are on the call this evening. So I will start off with sharing the GIS map. So that you guys can get an idea. So here is the subject property. It's a single family residential house. The blue area is our standing water layer in the GIS system. And I believe the wetland area is probably a little bit larger than where that standing water layer is. And here's the sketch of the proposed drainage repair. Basically, they're looking to repair broken footing drain, is my understanding, which discharges to a dry well area, which was one of my areas of concern. Basically, there's an existing lawn area and all activity is within that lawn area. And then the wetland is kind of appears to be immediately adjacent to that. And then this is kind of a rough approximation of the area that they're looking to modify the existing lawn to hopefully help reduce ponding of water on the property by placing, I believe, crushed stone and some topsoil. So I can hand it over to the applicant to discuss in greater detail unless the commission wants any other staging information to set the stage beforehand.
Why don't we have the applicant
Actually,
illustrate?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I'll just show the pictures real quick. So from the street, this is the street side, and the wetlands are in the back of the house and on this side of the house. So this activity is about as far from the wetland on site as possible. Going along the side of the garage where the drainage repair was made. I believe the dry well outlets in approximately this area where there's some phragmites. And then this is the wetland area behind the property. And silt fence, which was put up but not properly installed at the time that I went out there to inspect. And then we've had some weather that's made it a little bit difficult to install properly, however, also reduced erosion potential given the fact that everything's frozen. So with that, if the applicant wants to go into greater detail.
My name is Christopher Burr from Burr Property Maintenance, speaking on behalf of Kevin and Danielle Reese in proposal, for the proposal of the drainage work and I would say the regrading, slight regrading of the property. So well, I'll go into detail about the drainage first. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So the drainage system that was in place, when the homeowner first had me go look at this property, which was approximately September or so, we had found existing drainage lines that had been popping out of the grass in some very saturated areas of their yard. I don't know if it's due to erosion over time, that there were just very low spots, but someone had attempted drainage at this property at least twice. So I dug a test hole just a brief, 6 inches down in the ground, and I found, completely crushed and pipe full of sediment. So obviously that was not doing its job, the appropriate job. In another softer spot that Jamie had touched on about in the far back corner of the property, I noticed there had been some crushed stone that had mixed in with the grass. I didn't know if that was just somebody had spilled it when they were working or what have you. But if you dug right below the grass line, there was already a pre-existing dry well put in with 2 feeder lines coming off of the downspouts on the drains on the corner of the garage on the front side of the house and on the rear right side of the house if you're facing it. We had found, original lines that were put in. I can't tell you when they were put in or how long, but I could tell you that they've been there a while, judging by the fact that the lines were crushed. They had sediment that had grown in them and actually hardened to the point where instead of being a lightweight 10-pound pipe or 5-pound pipe, it was extremely heavy to take out of the ground. So we did find an existing dry well. So we removed all of the existing pipe. So it was attempted twice. Once with I want to say a very cheap homeowner model pipe that you could find at your local hardware store. Nothing commercial grade and not anything that would do perform the duties that they were looking to do to achieve from this. So we took all the existing pipe out, and then that solid line that I have right next to the garage where it's got 2 arrows encompassed in it. We followed the exact same path of where the drainage had taken place prior to that. The dotted line that you see on the right side of that is referring to an existing line that kind of went out in the middle of nowhere. We just removed that because it wasn't helping any bit, and their yard wasn't draining water properly. There are too many low spots. Unfortunately, their property just sits at a very low spot on their road. I think if I have to say, if I can remember this correctly, it almost appears as if the water comes down off of Sandra Drive, so the far side of Sandra Drive, and then comes off of Applewood down that road. And unfortunately, they have the lowest property, so they receive the most runoff during any kind of rainstorm or snow melting or what have you. And obviously the increased water table right now, and the fact that water doesn't drain properly or disintegrate into the ground properly at this time because of the normal than higher water table. So we thought that, okay, well, if we replace the drainage lines, hopefully we can get some of this water away from the highest concentration of saturation, which is on that side of the house, and move it to the back where that existing dry well was. So all of the pipes are just repairs of what was already done. Again, I don't know if it was permitted, not permitted. That's obviously above our knowledge. And then our plan after that was to use a crushed stone base instead of really trying to dig at the property and really excavate a lot of material. It was to remove the grass that was there, to get underneath to see how bad the saturation was. And I mean, you couldn't put an infant on their yard without sinking down. So we're using crushed stone base about 1 inch overall throughout the entire work area, which was highlighted in the first picture, I believe, that was submitted. It's a dotted work line area. So it encompasses the back of the house and then along the right side where most of the water issues that they have are. The stone, there are in the lower spots, we're going to use a little bit more crushed stone just to create a little bit harder of a base. And then, so it's approximately about 1 inch across the whole yard with variations of 2 inches to 3 inches, depending on the areas of saturation. So there were a couple that were close to that dotted line on the far right side property line. There were a few over there. There were a couple adjacent to the garage. There were a couple that were adjacent to the back side of the house. There's an existing deck right there. I'd say medial to the house, about midway point, maybe 10 feet off the house. There are a couple of really unusable areas is really the best way to put it. And then as soon as the crushed stone base is put down, we plan on putting just freshly screened topsoil, a 2 to 3 inch layer, just enough to grow grass again. And then we plan on planting grass in the spring. And that's really the extent of the project. It seems like a lot more than it is, but it's really just to give them a usable yard again. Unfortunately, they were sold a property that I don't believe that they were entirely told the truth about in terms of how the functionality of the yard and how extensive the issues really were. So we're just trying to give it to, they spent money on this home and we'd want them to be able to use every part of this home, not just the interior portion of it. So that's the extent of the work we're doing here.
This is Commissioner Basserman. Jamie, do we have sufficient details on this quote application, sufficient that we would have a good record of what was done? Or are we missing pieces here?
It's Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. So I believe this house was built prior to wetland regulation. I do believe that there was some sort of existing drainage system on site. We don't have anything in our files for any applications for this property prior to this application at hand. I did tell the applicant that I would expect the commission to want to see a wetland soils report for this property as part of the application at least. I didn't want to require a whole bunch of additional information prior to bringing it to the commission to see what extent of information the commission thought was necessary. I do think getting soil scientists involved is important because it helps clarify where the wetland limit is relative to the associated activity. I also think a wetland scientist might be able to provide a little bit more information that might be useful to the project, and possibly provide some planting information that might assist in some of the water issues. I do think ultimately to solve this problem, the applicant would be best served by getting an engineer involved, but I also understand that, you know, their new homeowner, they didn't realize that they needed a wetland permit for any of this activity, and that they did contact me and try and take the right process once they realized that there were additional steps to take. So prior to requiring everything that could possibly be required, I said, let's talk with the commission. My biggest concern would be the soils report and wetland scientists' feedback. And it is clear that the activity is within the existing lawn area on the property.
Mm-hmm.
They're not enlarging the lawn area. They didn't do clearing of trees or anything like that.
This is Commissioner Boda, and I'm kind of thinking out loud. So I think what I would be very curious about is just some of the distances. I think there's really no sense of scale on this drawing, and depending on like what if all of the work is an existing lawn, and you know there's existing lawn that's 30 feet behind it, I guess I'm not worried about if they are mapping, if they're having a soil scientist map lawn. Do you know what I mean? But I can't discern that because there's no distances on anything. And so I think, again, I'm thinking out loud, I feel like we need distances, and then depending on the proximity to what we currently have as wetland or where the disturbance is, then it may be necessary for a soils report. But if what we have on the town map and what we can see visually in the field is 40 feet away, I don't know that we need a soil, I don't know that I need a soils report for work that's done on existing lawn.
So if I apologize, Christopher Burr here. If I could just address your concern, Commissioner Boda. So if you look at this GIS map that's currently, it's up on the screen, we are within the confines of the lawn. All of the disturbance is before that tree line that you see right there. So everything is existent between that. And so I have approximate measurements that I took from the property line and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife map, and along with other things. And it's approximately 260.26 feet from the street end of their property line to where the wetlands begin. And we are within approximately at the furthest point or the closest point to where the majority of the work is happening. Behind the house, we're really just putting in a little bit of crushed stone and replanting grass. There is no major disturbance, and it's in close proximity to the house itself. But the major, even the drainage portion is past 100 feet from the beginning of the wetlands, based on the U.S. Fish and Wildlife map, based on the maps that were provided me by Jamie. And so, I mean, we're not talking like I'm 5 feet away or 10 feet away. Like we're a good distance away. So
this is Commissioner Boda, and I think that needs to be documented. Like the sketch I understand what
Okay.
you're saying. But to look at a sketch and overlay it on the town GIS map, and I think that at that point, and maybe we take a site walk and we can just kind of verify that,
Sure.
you know, what the town has for the GI, like, you know, I need some numbers, and I think that we need to ground truth it a little bit. I'm not super, I mean, I think that it's important that we're fair and uniform with our need for verification with soil types, but I also, if the work would be de minimis and in that it's such a distance from the wetland, like I don't need you to soil type grass that's 60 feet from a flat disturbed area.
Okay.
And I don't speak for the whole commission. That's just my.
This is Commissioner Basserman. I guess, do we only have two basic documents that for this property, the sketch and the sheet that we're looking at now?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent.
And the pictures?
Yeah, we have the pictures. I do also have the NRCS map. And according.
Commissioner Reynolds, there's a soil report. I mean, a report, not a soil report, but a report of conditions regulation someplace here. I have it, I think, isn't it? Did I see?
So Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I was going to suggest that maybe a site walk might be a good idea. Like, the biggest concern I guess I probably have is the activity of the dry well. But I do believe that the activity is pretty much confined to what was already lawn and already part of the drainage system. I do think the wetland is closer. I think it's more like 15 to 20 feet from the activity. So I think if the commission sees it, even if it is that close, if you're comfortable with waiving this wetland report, then I think that is something that would be appropriate for the commission to determine. I think as the inland wetland agent, it's a little much for me to decide to waive it in this particular case, which is why I said to hold off on submitting the wetland report for now and to ask the commission at tonight's meeting. So this is the NRCS map, which is a resource that a lot of wetland scientists use as they start their on-site investigation. And according to this map, the house is in wetland soils, but this is a very general tool. It's used on a general basis to show approximate location of wetlands. I do not believe the house is in wetlands, but I do believe that the wetlands are fairly close to the limits of the line.
This is Commissioner Boda again. I think, Mr. Berger, I think the other, in addition to the distances that need to be marked out on a sketch, we would also need a profile of what it is that you're planning to put in the ground. So if you're planning to do, you know, whatever you're planning to put underground, we need a, you know, if it's a couple inches of crushed stone or like, that needs to be specified more clearly. It's not just a verbal narrative.
Jamie Frederick, wetland agent, there is a written narrative as well.
Yeah, can we get a sketch of that on that existing sketch? I mean, maybe you can add a little call out for it, because essentially that would be part of the application.
Okay.
Commissioner Boda suggested a site walk. Sounds to me like, given the nature of this site and the activity that is proposed, as well as maybe the lack of documentation that we have on current condition, et cetera, seems to me that that's an appropriate next step. Can we schedule that tonight?
February 5, maybe? Commissioner Boda.
What day of the week is that?
It's a Saturday. Is it light enough to do after work?
It depends on what time people are available. I think
I can make myself available when need be. So
Well, Saturday avoids all that, the question of timing, et cetera. Is that what's on the table, February 5th, Saturday?
I just threw it out. I'm not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that work for everybody?
Morning or?
Yeah, definitely
Yeah.
morning. 10 o'clock?
Yes,
Sounds good.
that's fine.
And what was the date?
I believe
February
Commissioner Boda
5th.
said February 5th.
February 5th at 10 a.m. is what I have.
Sounds like a plan.
I'm in.
Okay. Any other questions for the commission?
Just so that new commissioners and the applicant is aware, we will file an agenda and send that out to everybody to confirm the time and location of the site walk meeting.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything on that 21-11-02? All right, moving on. We have a jurisdictional ruling request for 93 Bradley Street.
Oh, wait,
Oh.
you jumped ahead. That was 22-01-01.
Yeah,
We're moving on to 21-11-02.
What about the application for review on Austin Ryle Lane?
Good.
yeah, that's 02.
That's 02.
Yeah, we just did 01.
Wait a minute.
I think,
We're 01.
Peter, I think that when you called it out, you mentioned the Austin Ryle Lane project, but the whole discussion was about two Sandy Drives. I think the numbers may have gotten confused there.
I agree.
Okay, on my regular meeting agenda, I don't have, wait a minute, I'm looking at the one dated,
You got the old one.
the 171?
Yeah, and 110. We have one from 110.
110.
There's a
Gotcha.
revised one.
Gotcha. Okay,
So for clarification, we just discussed IW number 22-01-01 to Sandra
Yep.
Drive, replacing ineffective / broken drainage lines and leveling low
Yep.
spots in lawn. And so
That is
now we're
correct.
on number 3, applications for review. IW number 21-11-02, 140 to 240 Austin Ryer Lane, repair / replacement of drainage outlet.
Wait, Jamie, this is Commissioner Boda. Should we, I think we skipped 2A, which is 21.120326 Old New England Road.
we
Nope,
didn't skip
that was the first one we discussed.
We talked about that.
Oh, yeah, we did. I'm sorry.
COVID is having effects that we couldn't even anticipate.
I don't
Okay.
know. The agenda that I got in the mail was much shorter.
Okay,
We only
Jamie,
added 2 things.
the fact that they were both drainage outlets is the other strange thing here.
Yeah.
Jamie, can you frame Austin Ryer Lane for us?
Sure. So Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. This application was received. Commission had briefly discussed any mitigation requirements that would be required. The activity does involve approximately 2,000 square feet of watercourse impact, which appears to be created from the failure of the existing drainage structure, and less than 50 square feet of impact to wetland. So at the last meeting, the commission asked for staff to consult with town council to see if there was any option or ability to reduce the mitigation requirement below 1:1. Given the unique circumstances of this application where it was submitted in result of a notice of violation, it's obviously a passive structure failure issue that the association was not particularly directly involved in, but will now have to resolve. And given the slope and extent of the project, trying to make it a little bit more feasible to address. And the response was that no, the regulations clearly state that it's cannot be reduced below 1:1. I do think that the commission can discuss kind of what it is. I think the applicant has a couple of thoughts to throw around and see what the commission's response is to that. Also, at the last meeting, the commission did consider a fee reduction request that the applicant had submitted and did grant a fee reduction. And so I think at this point, it's a matter of clarifying what information needs to be submitted to move forward. I did send out a staff report to the applicants this afternoon, which I have not sent out to the commissioners, but is available in the Dropbox. And we can take a look at that if the commission wants. And then the other thing that we have received since the last meeting is authorization from Island View Village 1, because there are 2 different condo associations that own the same property. So we needed authorization from all of the property owners, and we have received that as of today. So I can pull up the plan, I can hand it over to the applicant, or I can answer any questions.
This is Commissioner Bassman. Why don't you pull up the plan and we'll go forward from there.
Jamie, would you like me to pull the plan up on my end?
If you want to be able to point, then yeah, absolutely. If you want to, I can let you do that.
So in case anyone needs refreshing, this is the end of the driveway that is Austin Ryer Lane that provides access to Island Village.
Commissioner Bassman, can you state your name and?
Oh, sorry, Pete Parent with CHA, representing Merit Properties, the owners, the property managers of Island Village 2.
Mr. Parent, could you zoom in just a little bit?
Sure.
Please, thank you.
So this is the roadway and parking that provides access to the condominiums of Island Village View 2. All of the drainage structures along that road and parking area eventually discharge to this outlet. And as Jamie has mentioned, the outlet has failed, resulting in a fairly significant scour area. And that scour has been there for long enough and gotten deep enough that it has intersected with the seasonal high groundwater. So this channel now has evidence of flow and water absent a rain event. So it meets the definition of an intermittent water course, which is why we're now discussing mitigation measures. So what I've kind of sketched on here is my initial thoughts at what we may consider doing if the commission was amenable to it. We'd be seeding this green area with a wetland restoration mix, either from Ernst seeds or in the wetland plants, providing a couple clusters of wetland species shrubs, swamp azalea, swamp rose, willow, arrowwood is the kind of what I quickly picked out this afternoon, and then providing 2 little micro levees, 3 to 4 inches high, kind of an eyebrow shape, to further reduce velocities and kind of spread some flow out and provide some water to this area that's currently surrounded by wetland but is not mapped as wetland under existing conditions. And that area equals about 2,082 square feet based on scaling it on the plan here. And based on Jamie's measurements, we've got about 2,000 square feet of existing disturbance. So that would bring us pretty close to the 1-to-1 ratio.
Clarify real quick, those measurements came from the application form. I didn't calculate them. But I don't disagree with them necessarily. Okay.
I have a question. Can you hear me? Are the plantings appropriate for that site?
So certainly we would provide a more detailed plan if the commission is amenable to this idea. Those plantings that I threw out there are either wetland obligate or wetland facilitated shrub species that do well in shady areas. But I'd have our landscape folks do a little bit better research on what would be the best options there.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, would you be proposing any erosion controls along the limit of the mitigation area?
Yeah, I believe, we're going right up against the limits of the wetland with this mitigation area. So I think we would probably provide either a straw wattle or something with a limited amount of disturbance, but still an ENS control measure while we were doing that work.
This is Commissioner Papantonis. I heard that you had a couple of suggestions. So what's the other one?
So I mean, the other idea, instead of doing something so near to the wetland, and then this is kind of a little bit more off the page as far as providing a benefit to the wetland. We obviously get this very steep slope that drains to these wetlands that currently has erosion issues and rills throughout. We could do some additional, more permanent erosion control measures. Providing, we're obviously gonna have to clear this area. We're gonna have a lot of logs. We can provide tiers and terraces made out of those logs to kind of provide reverse benches in this slope, provide more shrub plantings on this slope to provide a little bit more understory to slow the water down and that sort of thing. If that was something that the commission was open to as well, I just felt that this was probably the closest option to true wetland restoration, wetland enhancement. But certainly we could do something further upland that I think would also have a benefit to this particular wetland, given the steepness of the slope and the erosion that is currently occurring out there.
Mr. Grant, this is Commissioner Boda. I'm wondering if you did just the mitigation in the right adjacent to the wetland and in the wetland, if that would go undisturbed without doing the work above those reverse benches you were just referring to.
Right. So I mean, certainly as part of this project in general, we are regrading this area to a more consistent slope, and we're providing a dense grass mix. So I mean, I think we're already providing some benefit, but I think you could provide even more benefit with reverse benches. Certainly, everything is going to help. I just, what the limits of what the commission wants to see is kind of why we're here tonight to kind of talk through that with you folks.
Well, this is Commissioner Boda. I mean, I think it's a tight spot, and I think that this is a good starting place for restoration and some mitigation. I would be curious about the details of the planting, but it sounds like that's further off yet.
Yeah, we would have to provide, a much more detailed plan for you folks for review. We just had this conversation with Jamie over the last couple of days that this, was indeed going to be required. So we just kind of wanted to have a conversation with you folks about what you would be looking to see, so that when we put a plan together, we're putting something together that you folks are going to feel comfortable with, and we can get this taken care of next month.
This is Commissioner Bassman. Commissioner Boda, is there a concern that the work activity above the green area, et cetera, would not achieve the desired effect, or what is the concern about dealing with maybe the lower right-hand portion as opposed to anything regarding benches or the area to the left?
This is Commissioner Boda. I think I was just the lower green area. It seems like that work could be undone if the work above it, those benches aren't you know, if they're not done in such a way that over the period of time, we're not going to run into the same issue with the erosion. This area in general tends to be problematic in this section of town. So I think the two together is helpful. And I think that doing some of the restoration work within a wetland or water course, I think that can be helpful, especially this particular watershed has been pretty beat up and is very, very, very flashy. So I don't think there's any easy solutions. Otherwise, the town would have tried to tackle it 20 years ago. But
so you would be more comfortable with both areas being addressed?
Yeah, I think that's, you know, you sort of I don't know, but I feel like if you just did the mitigation down below and didn't give that extra kind of armoring to the slope, that there might not even really be a purpose. Over time, you'd end up in a similar situation.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, to kind of go off of that, I was trying to recall earlier today, has a maintenance plan been submitted as far as like routine inspections of the scour pad? It very well could be there and I'm just not remembering.
You know, I don't think we have post-construction operation and maintenance. This is just during construction. We can certainly add that to the plan as well.
Just Commissioner, about a quick question. So with the plantings that you're thinking about, what kind of function are you aiming to enhance or restore?
So I was looking at some plant species that would have some wildlife benefit, you know, either food or coverage kind of benefits. Obviously, we're in a pretty wooded area, but we are creating this cleared area. So providing, you know, a little bit more habitat down closer to the wetland, you know, place for animals to hide, and, you know, food would be what I was looking to do.
Mm-hmm.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I know that the soil scientist that went out and did the delineation no longer works for CHA Consulting. However, if there is perhaps a wetland scientist available that could weigh in on the mitigation plan, particularly the plantings, I'm not sure if that's something the commission would like to see.
This is Commissioner Boda. I mean, we do want, Mr. Parent, you're an engineer?
Yes.
Yeah. So we just want to make sure that the person who is signing off on the plantings and the impacts is qualified to speak to those impacts of the particular plantings.
This is Commissioner Bassman. I assume there's a monitoring requirement for those plantings as well.
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. So per section 7.9, which is the mitigation requirement, it does require that monitoring be conducted. Compensation to activities will require compliance with section 0.10, which does have the monitoring requirements. And I can forward that section specifically to the applicant so that they're aware of that language.
Yeah, Commissioner Bassman, I think it just emphasizes the point that Commissioner Boda made. If we're going to have 5 years of monitoring and survivability and things like that, you want to make sure that the sign off of the initial plantings, et cetera, are, you know, professionally assessed. Anything else on 93 Bradley Street?
Austin Ryer Lane.
Pardon me, Austin Riley.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I guess maybe for now, just kind of a general consensus from the commission. As long as the stability of the slope is addressed satisfactorily, is the commission open to reducing the mitigation requirement below 2-to-1 as long as it's at least 1-to-1 and the concerns mentioned at this evening's meeting are addressed? Might be helpful for the applicant as they go out to design.
Just Commissioner Bassman, and the rationale of why we would be okay with reducing the mitigation ratio?
So the regulation reads, filling or disturbance of a wetland or water course greater than 750 square feet will require compensation. Since it is not possible to replace a mature functioning wetland or water course within a created habitat, wetland or water course creation will be at a ratio of at least 2-to-1 in area. The commission may reduce the ratio on a case-by-case basis, but cannot reduce the compensation to a ratio below 1-to-1 in area. Compensation measures should be considered in the following priority: restore pre-existing wetland or water course, enhance degraded wetland or water course to improve functions and values they provide, create productive wetlands or water course resources. So I mean, I don't think that this water course really is a mature, properly functioning water course. It really, like, I've seen it. It's obviously an eroded channel from a failed drainage structure. So I think that there's some room to make an argument that they're not striving to replace a mature, properly functioning water course. So the 2-to-1 goal may not necessarily be necessary in this instance.
Commissioner Greenwald, I think 1-to-1 is perfectly fine in this instance because there really isn't a true water course as we think of water courses. It's created by the erosion. So I think 1-to-1 would be acceptable.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Bassman. I think that's fine. Just to be, we state for the record what the rationale is when we reduce it from 2-to-1 to 1-to-1.
And this is Commissioner Bode. So I think, and just to sort of reiterate that, then when you do provide the more details with the plantings, that it really, within the planting plan, specify the functions that those plantings are intended to provide. Because it's really, you know, habitat is nice, but, you know, whether it's stabilization or nutrient uptake, there are any number of functions that could be appropriate. And so I think just specifying that within the planting plan is going to be important, especially given the circumstance.
Okay, I think we come full circle on this one. Now, 93 Bradley Street. Maintenance of paved road, a jurisdictional ruling request. Jamie, you have some background on this?
Jamie Frederick, I'm a wetland agent. So this jurisdictional ruling request was submitted per request / suggestion of the commission in response to a notice of violation, as it was the thought was that the road was a routine maintenance project that might be excluded from the jurisdiction of the commission. So at the last meeting, the commission discussed possibly scheduling a site walk and the fact that the activities, it spans a couple of different parcels. So at the commission's direction, I did consult town council, and first and foremost, his response per our discussion, the jurisdictional ruling request should only pertain to the activity on 93 Bradley Street, as it's the owner of 93 Bradley that submitted the request, and 93 Bradley Street is the only address on the jurisdictional ruling request. And confirmed that any site walks on parcels will require authorization from the owners of all the parcels. So I have added a couple of GIS maps to the materials to help kind of orient the commission as to the activity. Essentially, to refresh the commission, there was a historic road in the location where the gravel was recently placed. And so the jurisdictional ruling request essentially had two different rationales. However, based on town council's guidance that it should only pertain to 93 Bradley, I would like to point out that all activity on 93 Bradley is greater than 100 feet from a wetland or watercourse. So I think that clearly in and of itself provides some information for the commission to consider. So let me pull up some GIS maps, and then if the representative for the owner wants to add anything to that, or if the commission has any questions, we can go from there. So screen sharing. So this is a subject property, 93 Bradley Street. And you can't really see it because the sanitary sewer is over it, but there's this parking area, and then you can kind of see this little stub of a roadway or driveway or something. We do have another map that does show the general road location, so that I can pull that up if anyone is interested in seeing that. But there's a crushed stone road, trail, pathway that curves along this spot that kind of hugs this knoll here, if you will, and goes behind these properties on Home Place and terminates approximately in this area on 1151 West Main Street. So I have a second GIS map here, which shows the approximate distance of 100 feet from the wetland. And if you follow along this roadway area, any activity on 93 Bradley Street would be greater than 100 feet from the wetland areas. So any activity associated with the notice of violation, not on 93 Bradley Street, I would recommend be reassessed at the notice of violation point on the agenda, and the commission can decide where to go from there. But the jurisdictional ruling request should only pertain to 93 Bradley Street. And if you want, I can pull up that which specifies the rationale for the request.
Yes, please. Thank you.
That's the statute or the regulations. So basically this goes over the history of the Maturos maintaining the pathway, which historically extended from their property on Bradley Street all the way to Route 1 through property now known as 1151 West Main Street. It goes on to mention that turnaround was added around the time that the portion going to west or to Route 1 was abandoned. And then in recent years, Maturos have had some health problems that have affected their ability to maintain the road to the extent they have in recent years. However, the road remained accessible and usable, and it was weeded with fresh gravel deposited this year. Water seeps through the gravel and no vegetation is removed except for the weeds on the actual path. The Maturos do not seek to expand the path any further than its current footprint, which does not encroach on the wetlands. They further do not plan to reconnect this section of the road that is overgrown.
So this is Commissioner Basselman. What is this commission needing to do regarding this activity?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So the item on the agenda we're discussing right now is the jurisdictional ruling.
Yep.
And it pertains only to the activity on 93 Bradley Street. So attached, here's a copy of the map where, again, this is 93 Bradley. This is the subject road that we were talking about. here you can say it says paved drive, gravel drive. We're only talking about the extent of the road that goes to here.
Mhm.
And that is greater than 100 feet from the wetland. So
Jamie, this is Commissioner Boda. So my understanding is we're being asked to make a determination if this is an as of right activity or that it is beyond the scope of our jurisdiction because of its distance from the wetlands of maintenance of that trail on that specific property.
Jamie Frederick, Inland Wetland Agent. So specifically, it's the activity on 93 Bradley. And I think without even looking at the merits of whether it's the activity in and of itself is as of right, I think the location of the activity kind of puts it outside of the commission's general jurisdiction. Usually the commission does not extend their upland review area past 100 feet unless there's a specific circumstance of concern, such as steep slopes or perhaps a direct drainage connection or something like that. And I don't see that.
Okay, so those are the follow-up questions, right? So
in this case,
is this a steep slope? It doesn't look like it. It's flat.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent wrong GIS map. Going back to the GIS map, the road goes around the hill, so it's relatively flat.
And is there a direct drainage connection?
No, it's all surface flows.
I don't think we have a case here.
So basically, the commission needs to make a decision whether to determine that the jurisdictional ruling is that the activity is as of right, non-regulated, or that it requires a permit.
Well, do you want a motion?
I think since a formal letter has been, or a formal request has been submitted, a motion would be the correct way to resolve and provide the determination to the requester. I don't know if the commission wants to ask if the representative for the property owner has anything to add before you make a decision, or if you just are ready to make a decision.
The property owner they want us to make a ruling that it's an
as of right, non-regulated.
So if we're ready to make a ruling as of right, is there anything else to contribute to that?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, my name is William Caldwell, representing John Marturo, the applicant. From what I hear Jamie saying, that the determination by the town attorney is that the letter, the notice of violation dated September 24th, 2021 is not appropriate because
we're talking about the jurisdictional ruling request right now. We're not on the notice of violation.
Fine, okay. Well, I guess I would then proceed with my argument that I did a month ago, that this is grandfathered in and that this use of this property was long before the Wetlands Commission was ever created, and quite frankly, long before there were wetlands on the property.
Mr. Cowell, I think I'm not sure if we're on the same item at the moment. And so maybe hold on a minute, because that is, yeah, I don't think that information is pertinent at the moment. So why don't you just hold on?
Fine.
Commissioner Boda, you were going to make a motion?
Yeah, I'm looking for the item number. Hold on, I have too many tabs open.
You looking for the agenda?
I am. I have like, I don't know, 17 drop boxes open at the moment.
I don't think there was an item number. It was just a
Yeah, it's just
jurisdictional ruling.
jurisdictional ruling for
Item 4.
Bradley.
Item 4.
Okay, so what number was it? 93? No.
Yes.
Bradley.
I have the agenda up if you want to reference that.
Thank you. So based on the topography being relatively flat, based on the lack of a hydrological connection between 93 Bradley and a wetland or water course, I make a motion that the Wetland Commission not take jurisdiction over 93 Bradley Street.
I'll second that motion.
Any last words?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent, I might suggest that you just clarify in reference to the activity outlined in the jurisdictional ruling request specifically. Because there are parts of 93 Bradley that would be within 100 feet, but the subject activity outlined in the request is not.
That's a trail maintenance in that small portion of 93 Bradley. Does that amendment work?
Renault, are you amenable? Renault, are you okay with that amendment?
Commissioner Grenache?
Aye.
Aye, okay. I'm not sure that I was in response to your question, Jamie, but.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm confused as to where we stand.
Do you accept the, Jamie asked if you accept the amendment?
There was a motion and seconded. I'm sorry, I missed the rest.
Okay.
The motion was amended to specify specifically the trail maintenance outlined in the request.
I agree with the, my second agrees with the modification.
Okay. All in favor? Wait a minute, do we need a roll call?
Yes, and
it's always good.
Chairman, would you kindly just call the commissioners, because everybody's order is different on their Zoom, so if you could maybe go up based on the order on your screen.
Yep. Commissioner Boda?
Commissioner Boda, aye.
Commissioner Grenache?
Commissioner Grenache, aye.
Commissioner Papatonis?
Commissioner Papatonis, aye.
Commissioner Begeman?
Commissioner Begeman, aye.
Commissioner Finaro?
Commissioner Finaro, aye.
Commissioner Steinberg?
Commissioner Steinberg, aye.
Commissioner Basserman, aye. I think I got everybody. Okay, now that we put that behind us, we have item 5, which is some enforcement activity. First up, NOV Island View Village condominium, drainage maintenance required.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent, we left this on the agenda in case anything would come up. However, I believe the owner is satisfied the notice of violation at this time, as they have the pending application that was discussed earlier.
Mm-hmm. Next up is 93 Bradley Street, clearing of vegetation and the placement of crushed stone.
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent, similarly, we left this up in case it would come up again. And as the jurisdictional ruling has now been satisfied, Commission needs to determine whether the notice of violation has also been satisfied or if additional action needs to be taken. During review of the notice of violation and the jurisdictional ruling request, it has come to light that there are other parcels involved in the activity. So if the commission is looking for any remedial action to occur, it would probably be appropriate to send out new either notice of violations and or cease and correct orders, whatever action the commission feels needs to be taken. And if the commission feels that there isn't further action that needs to be taken, then we would need to close out the file and or send any follow-up notification to whatever property owners the commission feels would be appropriate.
Well, this Commissioner Bassett, we were pretty specific on the jurisdictional ruling into that section of the road to which that applied. Are you suggesting that in other sections of that path still owned by 93 Bradley, that there are vegetation and crushed stone issues that the commission needs to deal with?
What I'm addressing is the fact that the road extends onto other properties. So if the commission wants any activity to happen on those other properties, a new enforcement action should be taken relative to those properties. And the commission should.
Excuse me, but this Commissioner Bassett, but that would be other than 93 Bradley Street?
Theoretically, but the commission should also confirm that whether or not they're satisfied with closing out specifically the notice of violation as it pertains to specifically 93 Bradley. And the commission should keep in mind that under the wetland statutes, the property owner is responsible for a violation, and the person that conducted the violation may also be held responsible. However, also keep in mind that the commission's only looking at wetland impacts. The commission doesn't get involved in private property disputes. So simply looking at how that activity impacts the wetland and whether or not any additional activity needs to happen for 93 Bradley, or if the commission wants me to contact the other property owners.
But based on our, Commissioner Bassman, based on our agenda, the item is 93 Bradley Street.
Correct, because that's the notice of violation that was sent.
Right.
However, the notice of violation pertains to the placement of crushed stone. So now that it has come to light that that activity extends onto other properties, the way of addressing that notice of violation may be to say, okay, no, this does not apply to 93 Bradley Street, but staff should follow up with the owners of 43 Home Place and 1151 West Main Street. Or you just close it if that's really what you want to do.
I guess I don't think we have any other course of action. If there is conditions that we are concerned about regarding the wetlands that are not 93 Bradley, then we need to issue a new NOV.
Correct. I would agree with that assessment. So ultimately, the commission needs to determine if they're closing the file for 93 Bradley NOV. But I think as part of closing that file, the commission needs to decide if they have to open any other enforcement actions, or if the commission wants to make some other determination.
I guess this Commissioner Bassman, I make a motion that we close out the NOV for 93 Bradley Street.
I'll second it.
Further discussion? So let's do another roll call vote. Commissioner Boda?
Commissioner Boda, aye.
Commissioner Grinalch?
Commissioner Grinalch, aye.
Commissioner Steinberg?
Commissioner Steinberg, aye.
Commissioner Papatonis?
Commissioner Papatonis, aye.
Commissioner Panaro?
Commissioner Finaro, aye.
Commissioner Bassman, aye, and I think I missed Commissioner Begeman.
Commissioner Begeman, aye.
Okay, now, I guess, Jamie, to the extent that you're aware of other conditions existing on that road, non-93 Bradley Street, then I guess we issue a new NOV.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, if that's how the commission wants to proceed.
Okay, so this is Commissioner Boda. I have a question. Is the work on Home Place and 1151 West Main, is there fill in a wetland? Is it adjacent to a wetland? Is it maintenance of an existing trail?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, I am gonna pull up some photos if I can. So it's placement of crushed stone on what was historically maintained as a road.
Can you clarify when you say crushed stone, are we talking about granite or are we talking about asphalt millings?
Rock. it's not the best picture. This was a picture I had received. I do have better pictures. Bear with me. All right, so here you can see the crushed stone. This is the closest area to the wetland. You can see some wetland vegetation over here. This is the stone on 43 Home Place. Honestly, I think it would probably be more disturbance to remove the stone than to leave it at this point. The commission can decide differently. That's just my thought on it. The commission could also decide to send notice to these other property owners stating that they're aware this activity has occurred, not planning on necessarily taking any action at this time. However, any additional activity, including future maintenance, needs to have a jurisdictional ruling request and/or an application submitted to the agency. Just one thought, commission can do whatever they think is appropriate.
This is Commissioner Boda. I think that the latter makes sense, and looking at the size of that stone, I know that it looks like stone that's similar to stone that has been placed on the Greenway Trail in sections and has washed out into the wetlands, and that's been problematic off of like Knollwood Drive area. And so I think that it would make sense to put those property owners on notice. Is there, I mean, it doesn't look like it looks like it's sloping down into yard.
This is Commissioner Papantonis. I have a question about this because my recollection is that it was the owners of 93 Bradley that put the crushed stone. Is that, and not the owner of Home Place? Am I correct with that?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. Yes, that's my understanding.
But
that's not the commission's concern. The commission's concern is whether or not the crushed stone is a violation of the regulations, and if the property owner and/or violator should be noticed of it. Or I think alternatively, rather than just dropping it and ignoring it, if the commission is going to determine that no activity is required to remedy the act or to resolve. So the two solutions I could see is ordering removal of the crushed stone or a jurisdictional ruling request for the two subject properties that are in the 100-foot upland review area. Alternatively, the commission could also just send notice, I think, if they deem that to be the appropriate route, to the two property owners stating that they're aware this has happened. At this time, commission doesn't necessarily think it's worth removing the material, but that any future replacement of material, including maintenance, would need to be submitted as a jurisdictional ruling request for those subject parcels and/or an application. Or the commission can require those things at this time.
Commissioner Vasserman here. I guess if that stone were to be removed, what is the likelihood of what's going to happen without that stone there?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. There's clearly maps that show it's a road, so I don't think the commission can require that it be vegetated. So it would just be bare, disturbed dirt, which I think would not be ideal. Which is why I think at this time it makes more sense to let it stay in place.
I agree.
However, the commission may not want to waive its ability to look at this in the future, which would be the reason to put notice to those property owners and maybe CC the person that did the placement of the stone to make sure that they're also aware of that notification, so that if future maintenance is desired in these locations, the commission can then review it subject to these parcels prior to any additional activity.
This is Commissioner Boda. I think the plan of sending communication to the property owners as well as the property owner that's doing the work or having the work done, that we don't need anything to happen at this time, but any future work and maintenance first needs to come to the commission for a jurisdictional ruling and potentially a permit.
Commissioner Granolch, I agree with Susan. Suggestion.
It works for me. I think it's the only
I think
appropriate
Jamie
solution.
started with. Basically, it's what Jamie was suggesting as one of the alternates. Notification to them just of the conditions, and so that if anything further is done there, they've got to come back to us.
Okay.
Okay, you got everything you need, Jamie?
Yep, I can share the letters with the commission under correspondence at the next meeting if you guys would like to take a look at it.
It's fine. Next up, notice of violation 113 Flax Mill Road. Placing of wood chips within the upland review area from resulting from removal of storm damaged trees. We got a picture?
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. The office received a call regarding concern of activity in a wetland area. So I drove by the site and I did see that there had been some wood chipping on site. I contacted the property owner because we did have their contact information on file. And they got back to me immediately. I went back out to the site and reviewed with them. It appears we do not have a wetland delineation for the subject property. However, it appears to me that the activity is likely outside of a wetland area, just very close to the wetland area. My understanding is that they had a lot of tree damage from the storms in 2020 that they were looking to address, clean up and make safer for their family to enjoy taking walks in the woods. The wood chips are fairly thin. There were a couple of places where I instructed the homeowner that he should thin them out a little bit more to make sure that the roots weren't excessively buried. And I'm not sure if the commission wants additional action. I would think one thing that you might want is a wetland delineation to confirm that all activity was outside the wetland area. However, I don't think there was. So let me start off with sharing a GIS map. And I believe I saw the homeowner on the call earlier. So the subject property is single family residential house. House is located here. I believe back in 2017, there was a violation with some tree removal and grading along the rear part of the yard. They submitted a planting plan, which I did see those plantings out in the field when I went out to look at the recent activity. The homeowner wasn't clear that even removal of fallen trees required authorization from the agency. It is clear that the trees did fall naturally. There's uprooted stumps. There was no ground disturbance. It was the owner had rented a wood chipper for the day and was chipping the trees that had fallen. So there are wood chips. So I think the two things the commission needs to consider is whether the wood chips are okay remaining and whether or not a wetland investigation is necessary. So the approximate area of where the trees were being chipped is this area right here. And I believe that the wetland area is kind of right on the border of that. And this is just a general, little bit more of an out view so that the commission can see the general wetland areas. So there's a wetland area over here and there is another wetland over here. We don't have any information between these two wetland boundaries.
This is Commissioner Brassman, just a question regarding, oh, okay, you got some good.
Yep.
I just wonder what other trees around the property that might become, you know, a similar situation over time with another storm?
I'll let the homeowner speak to that after I'm done sharing the photos. And I did have a bit of a conversation with him about that as well. And I did give him our general tree removal guidelines, so that way he's aware for any future trees that he has concerns of. Although he did point out a couple of trees that he is still concerned with that are on site. I believe they're further away from the wetland. However, there is also that wetland on the other side. So this is up by the street. This is nowhere near the wetland. And I didn't talk with the homeowner about it, but I don't even know if these wood chips are his specifically or if they're the neighbors, but it probably would be beneficial to pull some of these wood chips away from these trees here to expose the root flare so that the trees can remain healthy. The activity that I was concerned with is the activity you can kind of barely see back here, which is the activity near the wetland. So again, these are the pictures from up by the street. It looked a lot more significant from a distance. This is a picture of the activity up close, and the wetland area, I believe, is just behind these fallen logs. And I believe the intent along the wetland area was to not really move the long logs that were adjacent to the wetland area. Here you can see.
Just for clarity, this is Commissioner Bass, are you saying that those logs would remain?
I believe so, but we can confirm with the property owner. Is the property owner present?
Yep. Yeah, I'm here if everyone can hear me.
Miles, can you confirm one way or the other on that?
Yeah, I was planning. So what you see right there, I am planning on leaving the majority of that. One of my concerns is that I do burn quite a bit of firewood. I have a wood stove and I heat probably 50% with wood. So there are some larger sections of, good firewood material that I would like to take out, but not really along that edge there. More of the stuff is kind of in the center of my property.
Yeah, so like this material over here.
Yeah, I do have a couple stacked logs over there that I'm looking to basically turn into firewood. And there's a couple other that are still down on the ground that I'd be looking to do that with. And that's primarily the larger items. And there are still a couple of the broken tree sections that are hung up and I would be looking to get them out, but there's not too much left. I was able to kind of take most of the hazards out, but there are still a couple, but I haven't touched anything, since I talked to Jamie.
So this is an example of one spot where the wood chips are piled up and thicker. And then I think there's one other photo that shows along the base of one of the trees, but I mean, the other thing that,
Jamie, how important is it to have the delineation made?
I think that's really up to for the commission to decide. Like I said, I think the wetland line is somewhere near where the fallen material is on this side of the activity. I don't think that the area where the wood chips are is wetland, but I didn't do any tests. I didn't take any samples. I'm not a soil scientist, so even if I had, I wouldn't have been able to confirm one way or the other.
Well, my concern, I guess, Commissioner Basserman, is this is not likely to be a dormant site. Given the amount of material on the site and the fact that there's, being used to heat the house and all that, it would seem to be important to know where the wetland is and where it isn't.
Yeah, it's also the second time that this property has been before the commission. So I think it might be beneficial for the homeowner also to understand the limits of any wetlands on the property.
This is Commissioner Boda. I think it would also help us to determine, like for those wood chips, where is and where is not an appropriate spot. It may be that some of those wood chips are fine, but it may be that some of those wood chips are too close and are likely to become mobilized and end up filling the wetland, which would not be ideal.
As Commissioner Basserman, does the homeowner understand what's being requested?
Not really.
So Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent, let me try to summarize it. I believe the commission is looking for soil scientists to come out and do a wetland investigation, delineate the limits of any wetlands on the property. So that way we know where the wetlands are relative to the extent of the activity that occurred, and also to assess the whether any action should happen relative to the wood chips, thinning it out relative to floatability and other possible concerns relative to the wetland location. Is that correct, commissioners?
Yes.
Yes.
So I can provide the homeowner with a list of soil scientists that have worked in Branford in the past as a starting point of people to contact, ask around for pricing and availability, and try and have that available for the February 10th meeting. Is that what the commission would be looking for?
Yeah, I think that's good.
And so I'm going to be responsible for the cost of the soil, I guess, analysis.
It's Mr. Basserman, yes.
Okay, and what does that typically cost, I guess?
I think that's what Jamie mentioned, that she had a list of soil scientists, and I'm sure they have different prices and for their work, and you could evaluate which of those you want to go forward with.
And then some of my other questions are, what becomes the future of what I am or am not allowed to do, regarding like collection of fallen, wood on my property?
I may be out of line here, Jamie, correct me if I'm wrong, but at least since this is an NOV, I guess until we approve whatever is comes out with the soil scientists, et cetera, I don't think that any activity can commence. Hopefully after things get squared away, knowing where the wetlands are, the wood chip issue, et cetera, that'll be clear based on the report, et cetera, what is possible and what can't be done.
Jamie Frederick in the Wetland Agent. I think maybe that makes sense for any future clearing or removal of trees, other than things that may be a hazard. I did talk with the property owner. If there's anything that he's concerned is an immediate hazard, he can remove the hazard. So cut it down so that it's not going to fall. I think another thing that the commission might be open to is the pile of wood here that is set off from the wetland area that's not providing any ecological benefit. If you wanted to chop up some of that wood for use for wood burning, I personally don't think that would be a problem. I think all of this area over here should stay until we have that wetland report. And any
The only thing I would say, Jamie, is that you'd need to send some kind of correspondence indicating that even though the NOV is still in play, that section, demarcated or whatever, it is appropriate for activity.
Yeah, so I can send a follow-up letter outlining the commission's decision, what we've just discussed, and send the list of soil scientists with that to the property owner tomorrow so that he can start calling around.
Yep. Good.
And if he has any questions, he's more than welcome to contact us.
I guess I got one other question too. Or I don't know if it's a question or a comment really, but haven't formulated that yet. The other thing is, but I guess it dumps out behind my neighbor's house, not mine, but which dumps out into that wetland is a storm drain. So I guess for me, that's a little bit concerning that, is there any consideration that that's adding to some of the problem, or, if we are concerned about runoff and road salt or any of that, how does that come into effect?
Jamie Frederick in the Wetland Agent. Yes, there is a drainage outlet there. It's a pretty typical drainage outlet. As far as that goes, I think, I believe it's town structure. So if there's any problems with it, then I would recommend contacting the town for any maintenance that might need to occur. But it is a pre-existing structure. So it would need to be maintained and do the drainage that it is designed to do.
I think I guess my question is there any concern that is causing the wetland to expand beyond what maybe it naturally would be?
Jamie Frederick in the Wetland Agent. Looking at I've not been out there during a storm, so I don't know. If you have a particular concern regarding that, then you could contact, I'm not sure, either myself or Public Works, when send pictures or something when it's flooding. But I think based on the elevation, because you can't see it from this photo, but it does kind of drop down on the back side of where the stump is. So, and it does convey, there is, I believe, a water course. So this is the wetland area. I mean,
If I can jump in for a second, this is Commissioner Boda. I think as far as town storm drainage, so what you may not know, and you would not necessarily have a reason to know, is that in Connecticut, what is considered and what is not considered a wetland is governed by soil type. It's not governed necessarily by, you know, some water quickly passing through, or it's in some states, it's based on vegetation. For us, it's soil type. And so that soil scientist will come in and look at the soil itself and be able to determine what is and what is, like, where the wetland ends and where it begins. And wetlands, as just part of their general nature, do expand sometimes and they do shrink sometimes. It sort of depends on how water is moving through the system, but it's not something that happens in a week or a month or from day to day, which is why we use soil type, so that it is more predictable over time, and any changes that would happen over decades. They don't happen over the course of a week or a month. So I don't know if that provides some help in terms of like that storm drainage. I mean, it is now what it was a year ago. So, and these properties, you know, any of that storm drainage happened when that neighborhood was built. So unless there's been a significant new development in the past couple of years, you have what's been there.
Okay, hopefully the correspondence, Jamie, will outline enough for this homeowner to be able to get a soil scientist on deck, and we go forward from there. Another note, last one, notice of violation, 11 Pond View Terrace, placement of wood chips. Seems to be the day for wood chips. Wood chips within the upland review area as resulting from storm damage.
Jamie Frederick, and the wetland agent. I got a notice from the property owner that he would not be able to attend this evening's meeting, and requested that the item be continued to the next meeting, which would be February 10th. The commission wants, I can give a brief overview, or we can just do that when discussing it with the property owner. I think given the time of year, it's not likely to have any continued impact from now to then, or change in impact.
Let's hold off till February. Okay, other business, 391 East Main Street and 7 Featherbed Lane, clearing of vegetation, request for wetland investigation.
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. I sent this letter after being informed that I should take a swing by the corner of Featherbed and Route 1 because there was some recent tree clearing. So I did observe the tree clearing, and there is a drainage pipe, I believe it daylights on 7 Featherbed, and there's a bit of a water course that comes down to the drainage connecting into Route 1. So I requested the investigation to confirm the presence of the water course and that it wasn't excluded from jurisdiction for any reason. What happened was the homeowner at 7 Featherbed hired a tree company to remove some trees in the back of her property. I guess she had a tree fall on the house from that area, and she wanted to take out a couple of other trees. The tree company contracted out to another tree company, and the wrong area got cleared. and that area was on 391 East Main Street. So it was not an intentional clearing. There has been no grubbing. There's no intent to do any grubbing. And they did have a soil scientist go out. He did do a report. It says that the wetlands on site are the water course conveyance from the pipe connections. And basically his recommendation, he also provided a recommendation. So let me try and pull that up. And I believe we at least have the property owner for 7 Featherbed present to go over and clarify anything that I may have gotten wrong. So this is the area that was impacted. As you can see, for the most part, the only disturbance is from the tires right here, and it's nothing.
Jamie, you're not sharing your screen.
Sorry. All right. Thank you. All right, so this is the corner. You're looking at Route 1 in the background, and I'm standing on Featherbed Lane. As you can see, there's still a significant amount of ground cover present, so there wasn't, the ground generally is fairly stable. There is a significant amount of wood chips, but nothing too thick. And this is the culvert for the drainage going under Route 1. And this would be the water course area right here. So it's definitely part of the drainage conveyance, but it also it does meet the requirements for a water course. So going into the wetland investigation, the wetland is a narrow swale that mainly serves to convey water downstream. CLA feels that the site is currently stable and will remain so unless further disturbance is undertaken. CLA recommends the following: future work to remove debris be limited to handwork downslope of the corrugated plastic pipe, which would be the higher pipe discharge on 7 Featherbed. Work conducted upslope of the CPP outlet be done with knowledge of the pipe location in order to avoid crushing it. Work done above the CPP may be done with mechanicalized equipment. Site be cleaned up and restored. This involves removal of logs and debris. Wood chips may be left in place to compost and protect the soil surface. Plantings are not needed. In summary, there were no current wetland sedimentation or erosion control issues on site. The remaining cleanup should be conducted in a manner that is sensate to the resource.
I'm a little, this is Commissioner Bass, I'm a little confused. If we're looking at this, it seems to me it says we can leave the wood chips, but those wood chips are relatively close to that drainage outlet, no? So as we talked in the, huh?
Who's CLA?
The soil scientist was Bob Russo, who we've seen work from before.
So
if we were concerned about mobility of wood chips, wouldn't that apply in this case as well?
So I think in this case, I personally have not, I've been to the site from the street. I've not been on the site itself. But the wood chips aren't terribly thick, and the flow is restricted to the drainage channel. So I don't know
if we get a big storm that coming down that hill isn't going to move those chips.
I mean, we've had some storms since this activity has occurred, and I don't think so, because it's not there. It's not centralized flows. It's a broad surface flow like in this area. So the area where also, I think it has the benefit of having the ivy underneath it. So it looks thicker than it is, because if you think about how dense ivy is and the wood chips are sitting on top of it. I don't know, the commission could ask for more information, but that's what the soil scientists' recommendations were. And I don't know if you can see it any better in his photos, because this is from the top of the drainage channel on 7 Feather Bed. And you can see that it is a cut-in channel where the water drains. I don't think that it frequently flows outside of this channel.
Gotcha.
Beyond whatever surface water would be flowing naturally over that hill.
But Jamie, this is Commissioner Boda. I guess, what is it that we're doing with this item?
So basically assessing whether or not any additional action is required, or if this item can kind of be closed out in acknowledgement of the fact that it was non-intentional and that it hasn't had a significant impact on the wetland in reflection of the soil scientists report, and that the logs and any associated debris will be removed by hand in between the 2 pipe locations. Or if the commission wants to issue a notice of violation and or require plantings or something like that.
This is Commissioner Boda. So we have a report from Bob Russo telling us one thing. We can ask for additional information, but we can't just disagree with him because no one here is an expert. So I guess I'm just not sure, like, I don't really see a lot of options. Unless I'm missing something, because we can ask him for more information, but I'm not even sure, like, so we would ask somebody else to do it. Like, I don't mean to be snarky.
Well, I think that if you have a concern, so if your concern is regarding whether, let's say, it should be revegetated, kind of the function that you're concerned about. Are you concerned about the shading? Are you concerned about the overall tree canopy? Are you concerned about what are you concerned about impacting that water course? So that way he can specifically respond to that item.
That makes sense. So his report is in the Dropbox.
Correct.
This is Commissioner Begemon. It seems to me that in the past, when trees have been cut down, we've asked for replanting. So maybe that was just, maybe that's not in his report. Maybe that is something we can ask. Maybe he wasn't thinking about it. I don't know.
He does address it in his report. He states
plantings aren't required, is what he said.
Plantings are not needed.
Yeah.
But you could still ask for further clarification on that if there's a specific concern that you have. I'm not sure, maybe the property owner was trying to chime in with some information.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Yeah, so this has definitely been, my name is Leah Barton. I own the property on 7 Featherbed. Quite the learning experience with this, but I have had quite a bit of conversation with Mr. Russo when he came and did his report and after he submitted his report. From our understanding, he feels as though as long as we take care of the logs and kind of leave the wood chips in an even manner, which it is in currently, it should be okay. The trees were not intentionally meant to cut down. Our oak tree fell on our house August of 2020, and we just moved back in this past October. And with a recent storm that happened after we moved in, we felt strongly about cutting the trees down behind our house so it doesn't happen again to displace our children and I. So for that reason, we asked for our trees to be cut down in the back, but they subcontracted and cut the wrong area. Definitely wasn't intentional, definitely didn't want that area cut at all. But at this moment in time, Bob Russo did assure us that based off of what was there and there was no roots dug or extensive disruption, it should be okay.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I know at least one tree, and I think maybe a couple of, at least one tree was removed by Public Works a while back because it fell and needed to be removed given the proximity to the street. So, and they did wood chip that tree, and it's along the bank or the curb of the road. So not all of the wood chips on that site are from the activity that occurred recently. I forgot to mention that earlier, so I just wanted to make sure I said that. It is kind of a tricky one because yes, in this scenario, the commission usually would require plantings. I do think that the ivy that's on the site does help provide a lot of stability. It's not an ideal vegetation, but it is an existing vegetation. And so I think if the commission has specific current concerns that they would like further follow up on, those should try and be, they should outline those for the soil scientist to respond to. I did not make this a notice of violation because I was fairly sure that there was a water course on the property, but I requested confirmation. So this is not a notice of violation at this time. It is just correspondence with the property owners. And after I sent that correspondence is when I realized I heard that the removal wasn't even intentional. I know whether it's intentional or not, there's still potential wetland impacts and that's what the commission needs to consider.
But we have Commissioner Branford, basically we have a report that says that the wetlands are not in jeopardy. The water course is not in jeopardy.
So if the commission is concerned about specific things, that's what would need to be followed up on.
So this is Commissioner Boda. I think in terms of like thermal impacts, just thinking about like, this is not an impervious surfaced property. I mean, it's not a parking lot. And so I think that that change in temperature is a concern when we're increasing impervious and blacktop, and this isn't, you know, the water's going to hit the ground, is going to hit some ivy or whatever else on the property, and it's going to go, what is that, that's in the state system.
Mm-hmm.
I believe so.
Yeah, I don't see, I mean, given the report that we have, and then thinking about other wetland impacts, I don't think I need any additional information at this time.
Commissioner Reynolds, I agree with Commissioner Boda.
Yeah, and I don't think the ivy is an ideal vegetation, but it certainly provides stabilization and also kind of helps prevent invasives from being able to take a strong hold because there's already vegetation there.
Commissioner Bassman, would ivy be a prolific grower?
Generally speaking, yeah. And I don't believe it's not native. So, I mean, yeah, theoretically, it could be something that would make its way onto an invasive list, but it's not. And it is providing functions that are beneficial to stabilization. So
I guess I would agree with Commissioner Boda and Commissioner Goodall. Anybody feel different?
Nope.
Okay. Island View Village condominium. Did we deal with this already, Jamie, or is this something different?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent, we need to deal with it. It was mentioned at the last meeting, but we need to go in a little bit more detail.
Okay, you got the floor.
All right, so Island View Village Condominium 1, Island View Village 1, recent drainage improvements. So I did mention at the last meeting that Island View Village 2 did bring it to my attention that Island View Village 1 recently did some drainage improvements. I asked the commission if they need to submit an application. I did not share any visuals to the commission. It was a quick question trying to move on through the agenda. Commission said, yes, submit an application. I talked with the applicant and I came to the conclusion that I should bring it back to the commission to discuss with some more information prior to requiring the actual submission of the application. So the management company, I believe, for Island View Village 1 is present, as is, I believe, Chris Golo in Engineering, who they reached out to help submit the application form. Essentially what they did was they connected some roof drainage and did some drainage relative to parking areas to help prevent icing, and connected that to an existing catch basin that's probably about, if I remember correctly off the top of my head, 300 feet away from a water course. However, it does directly discharge. So the question is whether or not they actually need to submit an application. I have some materials I can screen share unless the applicant would prefer to provide visuals as they outline in more detail what has occurred.
Larry,
yes.
you want to address it, or do you want Jim?
So Jim Preddy, Criscolo Engineering. Steve, I don't know if you want to kind of back up and tell them how this started.
Well, I think
why this happened.
I think Jamie pretty much explained it, that we had a couple parking lots that water was permeating through the asphalt. It was a dangerous situation. We had several slips and falls. The insurance company was curious to know what the condominium association was going to do to alleviate the problem. We brought Larry Marsick in. Larry has helped me out in the past with his counsel in drainage work and paving work, soil sampling. I think Larry can best describe the downspouts, the water coming from the roof drains, any groundwater going into an existing system that actually was installed in 1999 and designed by Don Ballou. And I don't believe that any of the water now entering the system is taxing the system in any way. But I don't want to take any words out of Larry's mouth. So Larry, would you pick up?
Okay, my name is Larry Marsick. I'm the original design engineer, a licensed professional engineer. I was asked by the association to try to help them alleviate some of the problems they had with water coming up to the pavement. So what we did is put an under drain system on the high side of the parking lots. You can't really see this because it's a two-dimensional, but these parking lots are very steep. And they had slips, trips, and falls on these for icing, especially during the winter time. So what the intent was try to lower the groundwater table just around the edge of the parking lots, so the groundwater will not get underneath the pavement so they can bleed up during the cold weathers. So at that time, also the roof drains were, they had extension pipes leading off into the pavement, and they would flow down. They ultimately get to the catch basin down here. So they flow into the parking lot, flow down the steep grade, ice up, and people will, even though they put salt on it, they still slip and trip on the ice. So what the goal is to take the roof drains and put it into the system. And that's what we did here. So if you could see this network of piping, there's a under drain underneath it. They're filled with crushed stone, and there's another pipe that picks up the roof drain that goes into a system that was done in 1999 by Don Ballou and approved by your commission back then.
Jamie, if I could share the screen, I think I could picture it a little better. So let's see where are we?
I do also have photos if the commissioners want to take a look at that. And I also have a GIS map showing the catch basin location and the water course location.
So this is Village Lane comes down, the catch basin that it connects to is here. And this is the parking lot and the buildings that we're talking about. I'm going to go back to that picture that Jamie had. This is in color. It's a little lighter. It's a little easier to see. So here's the catch basin that that the pipes connect to. What was happening is all the roof drains on this side of the building were just running out and running across the parking lot, down the steep driveway, and all. They were already getting there. It was just taking a longer route, and they were basically shedding across the pavement. The only thing that was added that wasn't getting there was because they were already here putting the under drains under the parking lot. They grabbed 2 roof drains over here that amounted to about 900 square feet because there was issues with the person that was here falling significantly, and these were running right out into the parking lot. So they were already here. They grabbed those and added them in. So that was the only thing that was not getting there that is now. But all this water was ultimately getting there anyway from the roof drains. I walked this morning with Mr. Marsick, and you could, just from the snow melt, you could see how it was a significant problem when those drains are running.
So Jim, do you have some pictures that you took there this morning?
I didn't. Well, I didn't take pictures of that. I was looking at something else, but but just so you know, understand, this was the section that was put in. They only went 5 feet deep, and it was only 2 feet wide, and they put in a perforated pipe and about 10 or 12, depending where it was, to convey the stormwater. And it's, they're called out on here. There's a 6 and a 12 and a 6 and a 12 and a 6 and a 10. So that's the picture.
I do have pictures of the drainage improvements if you would like for me to share those.
So again, Jimmy, what is the issue for the commission here that the work was done and we need a
I'm gonna
application or what here?
That's the question. So I'm gonna steal the screen back real quick so that I can show the commission the distance and all of that.
Basically, it's connecting to an existing system that's been there for quite a few years, but the outlet is about 300 feet away or so.
Yeah.
So do we need a permit or not at this point?
Yes. So the question is this parking lot and this parking lot and the roof drainage from this building and this section of this building are tying into the catch basin located right here in which ultimately discharges to this head wall over here, which is
I think it's between the 2 buildings right there. You can't see it.
Yeah, because
right in there, right? Or maybe there. Maybe you're right. Maybe
I think it is here. Yeah, there's a flat area, obviously from the contours here.
Right.
But the pipe outlets here.
Right.
And then there's the water course below that. So it's about, and I only did it from the edge of the pavement. The catch basin's actually set further west. So it's at least 340 feet by the way it drains, approximately, because I didn't follow the actual location of the pipes.
So just to be clear that, Jim Preddy again, just to be clear that run that's highlighted there now doesn't just run from one end to the other. It steps down. There's what, Larry, probably 8 or 10 manholes.
Right.
So the energy is broken all along this whole run.
It was constructed.
Again, that was part of the original design.
Right.
Right.
So the concern ultimately is whether the direct connection of this water to the drainage system, which ultimately discharges to a water course, but that water course is a significant distance away, requires approval by the agency, or if it is not something the commission is taking jurisdiction over.
this Commissioner Bassford, if this were a new project or whatever, wouldn't we have, you know, calculations on the water movement and flow and all that? Which I don't think we have here, do we?
Sorry, this is Larry Marsick. You might have them during the application that Don Ballou submitted back in
1999.
Right.
But we've amended that with taking the roof drains and putting it into the system and other things, I gather. And I don't disagree with the need. It's a question of what do we have the documentation that goes with it?
I believe that Donald Ballou's report includes a drainage area that includes that area. They include the areas, not specifically piping to all the roof drains, but it includes the overall area, the size, his pipe going down to the outlet. I don't have the file, but the town may have it during the submittal back in 98, 99.
Yeah, but again, from my standpoint, that becomes, the prior recent activity picture, and now we have a different picture.
And I think, Pete, Jim had said is that even though the water is now directed underground, it was making it to that catch basin anyway as surface water. And Mr. Ballou figured that at the time that he designed the system.
Right. Jim Preddy again. Mr. Chairman, I was going to say the same thing. If we were doing the drainage calculations now, they wouldn't look really any different because the same impervious areas go into the same point. So we're not added. Nobody added any area here.
So the change is from sheet flow to through a pipe system.
Basically, but the same area that was already getting there. Yes.
So the calculations, Commissioner
Would be the same.
calculations wouldn't be hardly affected at all.
The calculations that change that just those little roof areas from sheet flow to a pipe connection at the outlet would probably be immeasurable.
So yeah, I think the concerns the commission would be looking at are volume, maybe the time of discharge, and water quality, and how that impacts the water course. So I think that the question of volume has been addressed, and I think with the water quality volume or the water quality there, Preddy did share the detail of the trench, so there is some.
If anything, Jim Preddy again, if anything, the water quality going into the system is cleaner now because we're not washing across the parking.
Yeah.
There would be improvement in the water quality, I would think. And also it shouldn't be,
avoiding any salts, any road salts, any of that stuff that the contractor might put down during the winter because it's all buried now.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I'm sharing some of the photos from when I went out to see the site with Margolis, and everything is stable at this point. The project is clearly done, and I don't have any concerns with its final stage of as far as erosion goes. And you can see that it clearly followed the specs of what was proposed.
Commissioner Bassman, I don't have any further questions.
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. So if we can get a general consensus from the commission as to whether a permit is not required, just to clarify from what was decided at the last application, at the last meeting without review of the materials that we have reviewed tonight.
I would agree no permit is required.
Commissioner Granholz, I agree.
Mr. Steinberg, I agree.
Commissioner Finaro?
I agree, Commissioner Finaro, I agree.
Commissioner Papadonis?
I agree. My barking dog agrees too.
Commissioner Boda?
Commissioner Boda, I agree.
Commissioner Beckman?
Commissioner Begemon, I agree.
I think I got everybody. Next up,
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for hearing us out. Thank you.
next up, Regulation Fee Subcommittee Report. I think a email went out to commissioners, I guess late yesterday or this morning, on a report regarding the Regulation Fee Subcommittee, which the report consists really of two sections. One is kind of a overview of when the commission decided to enact the subcommittee and the work that the subcommittee did over time. And then kind of the recommendations associated with that subcommittee report. I think at the last meeting, we said that as a regulation standpoint, it's probably best to deal with this at a special meeting. And I guess the activity for us this evening is to, I guess, schedule that special meeting so that we can review the report and decide what future course of action we want to take regarding regulations and the fees associated with that.
Commissioner Reynolds, did you want to do that before the next regularly scheduled meeting, or how soon do you want to tackle this?
Well, the only thing I guess that I would say is we already have a site walk scheduled for February 5th. I think it would be maybe prudent to schedule that meeting after the February meeting. But it would also be, I think, a good idea to review that report. And maybe we could have some brief conversation at the February meeting to the extent that there's additional questions that people have for the special meeting. Does that work, Jamie?
Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. I think if that the commission thinks that's a good plan, that could work. So that way staff can have any additional supplemental materials the commissioners want available for that special meeting. The other question I would have is, we do have the subcommittee report and the subcommittee regulation revisions to review. There were also some other items that the commission was looking to review generally in the regulations. Would the commission be looking to review those items as well at the special meeting, or keep it just to the fee revisions? Ideally, we would be able to get this wrapped up so that we can send it up to the state and have the public hearing. I am working on some additional information, particularly regarding bond regulation revisions, reaching out to other departments and whatnot. So in that sense, it might be nice to have the special meeting in February if we're looking to discuss all of the regulation revisions at the same special meeting.
Commissioner Vasserman, are there any regulation changes that have a time element associated with them that we need to address early on?
Jamie Frederick and Lynn Wetland Agent, yes and no. So right now our regulations are not compliant with the latest statute changes. However, the commission did make a determination as to how to apply the regulations in that particular instance. So particularly the regulation or the statutes were revised to state that multifamily housing cannot be assessed monetarily different than single family housing. And we used to have a fee bracket, or we have a fee bracket for single family and duplex, and a separate bracket for commercial and residential 3-family or more. So the commission determined that for the time being, until the regulations are revised, so that you're compliant with state statutes, you're going to assess everything that's residential as the single family duplex fee bracket. So ideally, the regulations would be revised to make it so that you're not running off of a determination that's not compliant with your regulations.
This is Commissioner Basserman, but didn't your suggested language in the October subcommittee meeting address the elimination of that category? So
Jamie
that's already
Frederick.
included, it's already included in our report.
Yes, it's included in the regulation revision.
Okay.
It's just a matter of adopting.
Right, right, no problem.
Well, Commissioner Granolch, I think it's in as much as that there's quite a bit of process to amend our regulations, and that we probably should pick up those other items that Jamie wants to add and at least discuss those at our February meeting. On mid-February, or late February meeting, whenever we have
Right.
special.
Right.
So this is Commissioner Boda. Are you then thinking that if we did that the end of February, then we would have a public hearing for the reg revisions
In March?
I'm Jamie Frederick and the Wetland Agent. So yeah, if we were to have the revision or the subcommittee or special meeting end of February, I believe it's 35 days. The regulations have to be sent to DEEP 35 days before the public hearing. So theoretically end of March, beginning of April, depending on when the meeting is held and when we can turn around and get the language sent to DEEP.
So the public hearing would be in March, I mean, probably not before April.
It would probably end up being in April, especially if the commission had any revisions that they wanted to review prior to us sending it to DEEP after discussions. So I do think it would be good to start the process sooner rather than later. And I do think if we are going to push off the special meeting to February, it would be a good idea to schedule that date now if possible to help make sure as many commissioners are available as possible and help make sure we don't keep pushing it off to next month because it sounds nice.
Okay, so our next meeting is February 10th, our regular meeting. I'm going to keep it on a Thursday.
Want to do it the 17th?
17th?
Right.
Seven o'clock,
So the week after the regular meeting?
week after the regular meeting. Does that work for you, work-wise?
It works for me. I'm not sure if Abby is going to be in that day, but if it works for everyone else, we can make it work.
Okay. February 17th, 7 o'clock for a special meeting to discuss regulation changes. Finally, we have the agent approvals. Anything here that you want to go over, Jamie?
These were all presented to the commission at the last meeting and okayed for agent approval. I received the information I needed and approved them administratively.
Great.
And then the last item, correspondence, Southwest Conservation District contribution request. I discussed this with Jamie Cosgrove. I believe it's the town's intention to make a contribution. And I believe that will either come out of the sustainability and compliance budget or the executive budget. So I don't believe we're going to have to include it in our budget specifically.
Great. There was also a email that was sent out to commissioners regarding a new training program that's been released by DEEP. I think it's especially important for new commissioners to avail themselves of the opportunity to go through that material. It's self-paced, it's online. It would be helpful, I think, to the extent that it broadens perspectives on the business that we conduct every month. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Question. So we've had a request from one commissioner that they do not want paper copies. So I just want to double check because I know we had asked this previously. Do commissioners all across the board want paper copies of materials still sent to them for application review?
Commissioner Granolch, yes, I do.
Yes, I do.
Does anyone not want paper copies?
Commissioner Begman. Commissioner Begemon, no paper anymore.
No paper anymore. Okay.
Thank you.
And I believe Melissa Finaro, did you also not want paper copies?
Correct.
Notice the young ones are the ones
Thank
that
you.
don't need the paper. Those older ones, we need the
I-
paper.
Commissioner Papantonis here, save a tree, please.
Okay, so we'll try and pass that on to the applicants so that we don't end up with all of that paper just sitting in our office, because that happens quite frequently. If we have the paper, do you want us to send it to you? Or no, you don't want to be bothered with it?
No paper.
Motion
Thank you.
adjourned.
Me,
So moved.
So moved. All right. And a second. Happy New Year, guys.
Happy
Thank
New
you.
Year.
Bye-bye now.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year and good evening.
Have a good evening.
Take care, guys.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.